Hey there everybody, Sage Apopum here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, and as they say, winter is coming. Or for some of you, winter might already be here, but nonetheless, this is the time of year when we start to enlist a particular set of herbal medicines in order to maintain our balance and health with the seasons through the use of warming herbs. Warming up not just the body, but also our minds, our psyches, our hearts. And that is going to be the topic of discussion today. So I'm going to want to cover some of the primary properties of warming herbs, why warming herbs are very important to use throughout the colder times of year, the importance of altering and adjusting and fine-tuning our lifestyle, our diets with the changing of the seasons. We'll cover some of the primary herbal actions and energetics and affinities of warming herbs, as well as some of my favorite warming plants that you can easily incorporate into your daily life. So I want to start off by talking about this principle that we see in many traditions of holistic medicine, where we want to alter and adjust the way that we live our lives with the changing of the seasons, with the changing of the weather. And, a lot of people talk about, living a natural lifestyle or being holistic and things like that. And that's all great, but I think sometimes it can be seen a little bit superficially, like living a natural lifestyle. Maybe that means, they change the products that they purchase from the store, or they use herbs instead of over-the-counter medicines and things like that. But if we're really talking about adopting a natural lifestyle, to me, what that really means at its core is that we strive to live our lives every day in accordance with the rhythms and the patterns and the cycles of nature. And we can do this on a number of scales. We can do this seasonally. We can do it daily based on weather. It's about synchronizing our life with the pattern of nature. I think one of the simplest ways that we can do this is by waking up when the sun goes up and going to bed when the sun goes down, limiting our internal lights to help our melatonin levels and secretions in our brain to be better regulated in accordance with the diurnal rhythm, things like that. And one of the ways that we can do this in terms of the seasons is by altering the herbs that we typically use. And one of the ways that we primarily do that is by looking at the temperature energetics of our plants, warming plants versus cooling plants, and shifting how we use those remedies depending on the seasons. And I think this is important. And I think, to be honest, a lot of us really practice this intuitively. This is why the concept of energetics in herbal medicine and constitutional management is not rocket science. It's actually really quite simple and straightforward, and it's things that we tend to do anyways. That's why on a hot summer day, you want to eat berries and drink cold lemonade. And in the winter, you want to come in after a cold, snowy day and drink chai and have hot soup. That is intuitively practicing energetics. Eat warming things when it's cold, eat cooling things when it's hot, etc. But this, of course, is, I would say, one of the more superficial aspects of the practice of energetics in more diet and lifestyle. It does have deeper reflections when it comes to practicing clinical herbal medicine. But this concept of warmth and warming herbs really goes back to, lots of different traditions, whether we're talking Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Greek medicine, Unani Tib. But I feel like the North American herbalist Samuel Thompson spoke to it pretty directly and clearly, where the gist of what he says is that warmth is life, cold is death. This is one of the characteristics that really differentiates a live body from a dead body. Of course, there's others, primary vital signs, heartbeat, respiration, movement, and all of that. But we do notice that temperature is a critical difference, warmth versus cold. And in Thompson's way of seeing people and the healing process is maintaining the warmth of the system as very, very important. This is why a lot of his therapeutics involved warming, hot, pungent circulatory stimulants, diaphoretic and sweating therapy, things like that. So the concept of cold pathologically is very, very important in traditional Western herbal medicine, and I would argue in other systems as well. Because cold, well, really when we're thinking about hot and cold, the temperature pattern of energetics, it's very easy for us modern folk to think of it in terms of degrees on a thermometer. Temperature energetics is not just degrees on a thermometer. It's not just, oh, I feel hot or I feel cold. It is a quality. It's not a quantity. It's not a numerical degree on a thermometer. It's what are the qualities of heat? What are the qualities of cold? And when we look at the qualitative characteristics of cold, what do we see? Well, we generally see the vital force tends to collapse inwards and sink downwards. So this is where, if you submit molecules in a closed environment to cold, those molecules tend to couple together more tightly. They slow down in their movement. They become less expressive in their nature. And this is what we tend to refer to in traditional North American herbalism as a depressed tissue state, so to speak. That tissue depression or organ depression is associated with a pattern of cold. And it's interesting word choice because typically when we use the word depression or depressed, we think of it obviously more in psychological, emotional terms. But that can have a physiological application as well to other parts of the body. So if you think of how does it feel when depression sets in, right? There's a heaviness, there's a slowness, a sluggishness, oftentimes associated with fatigue. There's a lack of motivation. You just don't really want to do much of anything. You want to sleep a lot. Everything's kind of heavy and dark and weighed down. Well, take that same quality and imagine, well, what happens if that quality is going on in your liver? What if that quality is going on in your digestive system? What if that quality is going on in your circulation of blood? Okay, this helps to paint a picture of some of the qualities of cold pathological patterns in when we're considering traditional humoral medicine. So when cold, and because this is the pattern that can tend to dominate during the colder months of the year, obviously. So when cold settles in, one of the primary things that we see is it affecting digestive system, because here in the center, the solar plexus region is the central fire of the body. This is something discussed by the alchemists, also discussed in Ayurvedic medicine in terms of Agni, discussed in Chinese medicine as the triple burner. Many different systems recognize the central core heat of the system and its importance, because that is not only responsible for the proper digestion, absorption, assimilation of foods, and elimination of wastes, but also has to do with regulating and disseminating the vital heat of the body. And what we see is when that digestive fire becomes depressed or cold in nature, that it tends to radiate, or well, the heat doesn't radiate out, but that coldness radiates out throughout the rest of the system. So we can see that the blood tends to slow down. The blood doesn't reach out to the periphery as well. People end up feeling cold hands and feet. They can end up with pale, cold skin. If the blood is not getting up into the head as well, remember cold sinks. heat rises. So the blood may not be able to get up into the head and the brain as easily. So we can see cognitive difficulties focusing, concentrating, mental fatigue, digestion is slowed down, metabolism slows down. And one of the other dynamics with cold is that, as I noted earlier, it tends to be contractive. And this can lead to, in some, tension. It can lead to musculoskeletal tension. It can lead to neurological tension, nervousness, anxiety, insomnia, things like that. Cold can affect that. And when we see cold coupled with tension, this is one of the primary attributes of the Vata dosha imbalance in the Ayurvedic understanding and the astrological medicine understanding. This could be seen as an excess of Saturn, which is the coldest, driest of the planets, and it does have a more of a contractive, constrictive quality. So everything is slowing down basically with this cold tissue state, which is where our warming herbs come into play. So what we see qualitatively for a lot of our warming herbs is that oftentimes these are plants that contain aromatic volatile oils, resins, terpene type compounds, whether that's monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, diterpenes. The terpene category oftentimes have a warming effect. Not all the time, there's definitely exceptions, but majority of them tend to be warming in nature. And so that those chemicals in these plants tend to give these remedies the taste of pungency, of aromatic, spicy, so to speak. And this is really the primary taste that we tend to think of having a warming virtue. And those are the chemicals that we tend to associate that. Now, when we think of traditional Greek medicine or Galenic medicine, Galenic humoral medicine, they classified not only herbs accordingly to warming, cooling, moistening, drying, but they had varying degrees of those four qualities. First degree being a very mild, almost food-like quality, whereas fourth degree is very, very strong, either really, really medicinal or to the point of being potentially toxic in higher doses. Fourth degree plants can, if used improperly, cause injury. So they tend to be the very strong low dose herbs or herbs that need to be used carefully because they do have a very strong effect. Typically as herbalists, we're usually using second, third degree plants, first degree plants if we can. And that's a really good general rule of thumb as an herbalist, is that if you can achieve the result you're striving for with a mild herb, always use the milder herb over the stronger herb. Like, we always want to use the mildest medicine to treat the people that we're working with. If you can get it done with chamomile, why use hops? You have a much less likelihood of creating a potential undesirable side effect. You have less likelihood of creating constitutional or humoral imbalance by using milder herbs. And we can even take it a step further, where if you can achieve the result you're striving to achieve with a dietary or lifestyle modification, even rather than an herb, you should do that. So we really, because that's going to be getting more to the root cause of the problem. It's kind of jokingly said amongst many herbalists that people don't get sick because of any sort of herb deficiency, but they certainly get sick because of vitamin and mineral and macronutrient deficiencies, to be sure. People definitely get sick because they make choices in their daily life that lead to them getting sick. And so if we can help someone through dietary and lifestyle modification, we want to do that even before we go to use herbs. But when we do use herbs, we want to use the mildest remedies that we can to achieve the desired effect. And I mention this because when it comes to using warming herbs throughout the winter to maintain constitutional balance during the cold time of year, we generally want to use those milder remedies, especially if you're going to be using them on a consistent daily basis. You want to use first or second degree herbs, generally speaking. Some of the effect that we will find, and what I tend to think of as almost a universal effect of a warming plant, is that you take the warming herb, it travels, and this is the first place that it starts. It starts here in the core, solar plexus. It starts to kindle that fire, that central fire resting there in the center. And from there, as that fire warms, it generates heat. That heat expands and radiates outwards. And so we'll see it radiating out into circulation of the blood, pushing blood to the surface, out to the periphery. And I would say this is kind of the main effect that I notice with warming herbs. And now the degree to which an herb will do that is really dependent on how spicy it is, how pungent it is, how volatile and aromatic and strong it is. And you can really delineate the degree of the degree of warmth of an herb based on the intensity of its pungency. So a very mild pungent herb will be gently warming to the core and move the blood a little bit. A really hot, spicy herb, say cayenne pepper, is gonna really, light your mouth up, light your stomach up, for better or worse, and drive that blood to the point where it opens the pores and makes you sweat. And this is an important principle when we're talking about warming herbs, especially for the winter months, is that key here is that you want to warm the body up, but keep the warmth in the body. If you ingest herbs to the point of them being so hot that you start sweating, well, now you're doing the opposite and you're cooling the body down. This is the whole function of the sweating mechanism, is to release the inner heat of the body by opening the pores, generating a sweat. That moisture on the skin cools down, the blood hits that coolness, recirculates back to the core, and generally will bring the temperature down. You don't want to do that in the winter time. If you've ever been out, we get a lot of snow where I live, and go out to shovel the walkway, and wearing a big puffy down coat, and you start getting sweaty in there as you're working hard, and all of a sudden you stop working and you get very, very cold. And that's because the pores are open, there's moisture on the skin, and that is going to excessively cool you down. And that is not good. Well, many traditions, especially they said Chinese medicine, there's cold invasion, that cold can invade the body, what's generally referred to as like an external pernicious influence. That we think in terms of weather. And this is why we call it catching a cold, right? I mean, it's right there in our language. For some reason, a lot of people don't believe that, but there is a lot of wisdom to calling a cold. It's because when your body is exposed to cold, it has an impact on your immunity, on your thermoregulation, and you can get sick from that. And so especially the back of the neck, they say the back of the neck is an area where that cold can enter. And this is why wearing a scarf is actually an incredible way to maintain body heat, because it keeps that cold from entering. So we want to use warming herbs, but not so warm they make you sweat. Some of the primary actions that we can expect of herbs in this category is carminative. So this is going to be a gastrointestinal action. Carnatives are generally going to warm the GI, bring blood flow to the GI, increase gastrointestinal secretions, and they generally will help to relax a bit of tension, spasm, cramping. They can ease bloating and gas and wind accumulation. But the Carnatives are a fantastic quality here, especially for someone that has cold digestion. This is really the main action that I tend to think of for people with cold digestion. And we want to warm and circulate and stimulate the digestive system in that way. From there, we move out to circulatory stimulants for the blood and for the vasculature. So here we have diffusive remedies, herbs that move blood, drive blood. Typically, herbs that move blood will help to relieve stagnation. Obviously, if you're increasing the movement of something, you will relieve stagnation of it. And on the higher end of those remedies would be the, and by higher end, I mean stronger degree of warmth and circulatory stimulation would be stimulant diaphoretics. So those are the ones that are going to be hot enough to drive blood to the surface, open the pores, and make you sweat. Fantastic class of medicine for acute febrile conditions, especially during the stage of a fever when you have a temperature, but you feel cold, the skin's pale, dry, you feel shivered. That's when you want to use the stimulant diaphoretics. Now, because many of these remedies have aromatic volatile oils or even resins, we find many of these plants also have a respiratory affinity and will act as stimulant expectorants. And this is really helpful because obviously, during the fall and winter and even early spring months, the respiratory tract is the primary area of the body that gets sick for people. So the stimulant expectorants are those herbs that are used to clear phlegm, cold phlegm from the lungs. So this is usually when you cough and you expectorate mucus. It is of a clear or white coloration. It tends to be thick. It tends to be kind of globular and congealed, but it's cold. And that is a really, really critical element to understand. When you have a lot of green or yellow mucus that's being expectorated, that typically indicates heat. And actually, many of the stimulant expectorant herbs can be contraindicated. Now, there are ways that you can still use them. You just need to formulate them properly to make it so that they're not going to be too hot to irritate and aggravate the respiratory tract more. Typically, you need combine them with more relaxant, demulcent type expectorants to moisten the mucosal membrane, relax tension and spasm, kind of calm everything down in there, reduce the heat in there. But the stimulant expectorants are really great for that cold phlegmatic cough. Again, due to the resin and terpene content, we will find many plants in this category tend to have antibacterial, antimicrobial actions. Now, some will say antiviral, and I'm just gonna, little side note on the concept of antiviral. I really don't like that term for herbs because I think it can be really misleading and misunderstood. There's no such thing as a broad spectrum antiviral, and viruses are very, very different in their underlying composition structurally from an anatomical perspective, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. That's why there's no, broad spectrum antiviral drug. They typically are very specific. And the same is true with herbs. Some herbs are very specific for some viruses and completely useless against others. And some herbs, the quote antiviral action of that herb is attributed to, a certain constituent being exposed to a certain virus in a petri dish. But when you observe the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics of that constituent in the whole herb, maybe it turns out that that constituent doesn't even get into the bloodstream. Perhaps it's not absorbed well, perhaps it gets biochemically transformed into a different compound. Either way, that compound that is, quote, antiviral doesn't get to the site of the infection and therefore isn't really antiviral against that particular virus. So I think that a lot more specificity needs to be demarcated in terms of when an herb is referred to as being antiviral. A really good example of this is lemon balm or Melissa officinalis. You know, everybody says, oh, it's antiviral. If you get a cough, cold, or flu, a viral respiratory infection, just take lemon balm and it'll kill the virus. It's like, no, it doesn't have any impact on influenza virus from my understanding of it. What the research shows with Melissa is that some of the compounds in it are specifically anti-herpes. This is topically, not even really internally. It's more topical usage of it against herpes simplex virus, which is very, very different from an influenza virus. So we have to be specific. But nonetheless, some herbs in this category are called antivirals, although it's not really a concept I generally tend to think of. It's a very allopathic way of thinking, which, you know, has its place from time to time. But nonetheless, many of them do have broader spectrum antibacterial or antimicrobial effects. Some of the more pungent circulatory stimulant warming herbs can also be nootropic, so they can drive blood flow up into the head and into the brain and really help to stimulate cognitive function. This is something that can be easily overlooked in the winter months. People start to get a little bit more mentally fatigued. It's darker, earlier, lighter, later. It's easy to get a little bit more mentally fatigued in the winter months, especially if it's very, very cold. So I do like the nature of some of the nootropic warming herbs to enhance cognitive function for those that need that. And some can be nervine as well. A great example of this is rosemary. Rosemary is a fantastic nervine, wonderful circulatory stimulant, and great nootropic because it specifically enhances cerebral circulation, aiding both blood flow to the brain and aiding the nervous system itself. So it really hits both sides of the nootropic equation. Some nootropics just drive blood. Some nootropics influence more the nervous system, and some do both. Rosemary is one that does both. Rosemary is one of my favorite winter herbs, both to incorporate into food as well as into, you know, a daily tea or something like that. Now, in general, if we're sticking to the theme of keeping warm with herbs, again, we want to use the milder herbs with milder medicinal properties, you know, as opposed to stronger herbs that are really specifically used to treat more serious or deeper conditions within the system. If we're just going for maintenance, constitutional maintenance and balance, again, like I said earlier, milder is better, especially if you're using it daily and over the longer term period of time. So this is going to be a safer way to use those herbs so you don't end up generating any sort of constitutional imbalance and things like that. So we want to keep keeping that warmth throughout the system using these milder herbs, not pushing it out of the system like the stronger ones do. And from an energetic perspective, many of these warming herbs, and from an Ayurvedic perspective, relieve the Vata aggravation, relieve Kapha aggravation, because both of those are cold. Some of them can help relieve, especially the hotter ones, can relieve the dampness and stagnation of Kapha. The one thing where you have to be cautious with using warming herbs with Vata, and this is why we like to use milder ones, especially for this constitutional type, is, well, what does fire do? It tends to dry things out. And so yes, Vata is cold, dry, and tense. if you use really strong warming herbs for vata, it's great, you warm them up, but you can tend to dry them out. And so this is why combining warming with some moistening herbs for this constitution is very important. Warming herbs also tend to relieve an excess of the Saturnian quality and the lunar quality from an astrological medicine perspective, as well as accumulations of the earth and water element. And then we use them for the cold depression tissue state and to an extent, the damp stagnation tissue state. So with that, our overview of warming herbs, let's talk some herbs. So I'm gonna be sharing a lot of herbs with you here that you likely are already familiar with and actually probably already have them in your kitchen right now, because a lot of these herbs are common spices that have fantastic flavor for your food, but also have notable medicinal effects, predominantly aiding in digestion of the food that you're eating and putting those herbs on. So some of my favorites here would be black pepper. I am a huge fan of black pepper. I didn't used to be, actually, but I'm a really big fan of it these days, specifically on food. I'm gonna go through a list of some herbs that are easily incorporated into your food. One of the things that I like about black pepper, and I think one of the reasons why it is one of our primary spices on food, is that it actually aids absorption. This is why you see black pepper extract or bioperine or bioperine, I'm not sure how you say it, in a lot of supplements these days, specifically supplements that tend to have poor absorption, such as curcumin extracts from turmeric. Curcumin is very poorly absorbed when it's by itself. Of course, whole turmeric extracts are very well absorbed because there's other things in turmeric that aid the absorption of the curcumin, as if the plant in and of itself has an innate intelligence and synergy to it. But nonetheless, the bioperine or black pepper extract really optimizes absorption. And this is really useful for food. A little goes a long way. This is a strong herb. I would say this is more in the 3rd degree category warming plant. Because enough black pepper can make you sweat. And so just a little goes a long way, but it really warms the stomach, aids digestion, aids absorption of the nutrients in the food that you're eating, which is really, really excellent. I love ginger as something to be incorporated into food, fresh or powdered. Of course, it works very nice in soups and stews. Works really great, obviously, in more of the types of dishes where ginger is traditionally used, such as in Thai cooking and things like that, curries and whatnot. Fennel is fantastic. I really encourage people to use fennel both in the kitchen and in your teas. We'll talk about a nice way to prepare a fennel tea for daily consumption in a little bit. Garlic, really hot herb, okay? So garlic is considered a 4th degree warming plant because it can blister your skin. If you take enough of it fresh, it can really kind of burn your stomach and be quite uncomfortable. Now, one of the things about garlic is that you actually need to oxidize it. Some of the compounds that are so beneficial in garlic are actually destroyed by heating. So when you're caramelizing onions and garlic in your pan with olive oil or butter, you're actually rendering the garlic less medicinal. So the preferred way to use garlic is fresh, and you want to crush it in your garlic crusher. Let it sit on the counter for about 15 minutes to allow, there's the sulfur compounds, alain and allicin. There's conversions that need to happen by exposing it to the air. So it's best to crush your garlic, let it oxidize, and then add it to your food, preferably at the end, so it's not being actively heated and denaturing the medicinal effects of the garlic. Now, I love garlic. Eaten raw is a great way to do it. I know it can be tough for some people's systems. So one of the best ways to consume raw garlic is with honey. Honey is a really great corrigant for garlic because the sweetness of the honey balances the intense pungency of the garlic. The honey also, in a sense, buffers that intense heat of the garlic in the stomach, so it makes it a little gentler on the stomach. And it's a strong flavor, and the honey makes it taste nice. You can actually make really great garlic honey cough syrup as well. This is a great cough remedy, circulatory stimulant, digestive stimulant. I mean, the benefits of garlic are amazing. It's very easy herb to overlook because it's so common, but this plant is amazing food, amazing medicine. Don't forget it. And then all of your Mediterranean type spices, thyme, oregano, rosemary, sage, all of these herbs are really, really good to use in your food, seasoning, your roasted potatoes and your chicken and your meat and your lamb and your vegetables and whatever. Use these spices in your food throughout the winter. I especially love them in soups and stews with nice oily bone broths and lots of vegetables and good grass-fed lamb and things like that. Really, really good to include. Of course, stronger amounts of these, thyme and oregano especially are very antimicrobial, very antibacterial, good circulatory stimulants, carnatives, great expectorants for the lungs. As I mentioned earlier, rosemary, really great for cognitive function. So these are great herbs to include, warming herbs to include into your food and diet. And then turmeric, of course, fantastic herb and spice. Like ginger, sometimes people don't really quite know how to use it in the kitchen because it is a strong flavor. But I encourage people to experiment. But of course, curries and soups and stews are a fantastic way to use turmeric, but also play around with it in just vegetable dishes. It is a really nice flavor to be used. But I find turmeric, I like ample quantities of turmeric that sometimes are hard to get in your food. So it's nice to use in your food, but I also think you can get the most benefit from turmeric by using it in larger, more herb quantity doses. So these are some of my favorites for incorporating into food. Now we have some of my other favorites that are great for in tea. And I think making yourself just a nice winter warmer tea for the winter months, but blending the bulk herbs and just having it, in a jar in your tea shelf or kitchen is really, really nice. So here we get into more of what I tend to think of as like our mulling spices or chai spices that people tend to just enjoy drinking as tea. So we've got things like cardamom and cinnamon and clove and nutmeg and ginger. Again, these are fantastic herbs. They are, some of them very strong, a little goes a long way. And these make a really, really nice tea that creams very nicely. You can add some sort of milk or creamer to it and a little bit of honey. Just makes for a very nice, not just warming to the body, but also there's something, in my experience and many other people I've talked to about these types of herbs, there's also like a comforting, cozy feeling about drinking some nice cinnamon, cardamom, clove, nutmeg tea. And of course, these are herbs that are featured in a lot of classic hot, spiced winter cocktails as well. And my two favorites are the hot toddy and the hot buttered rum. So I like a hot toddy. We do our hot toddy a little different in our house because we try to make it a little more medicinal. So the way I do it is I'll take fresh ginger root and grate that, maybe a tablespoon or so's worth of fresh ginger. I'll squeeze that into the mug. I'll squeeze half a lemon into that, a good portion of honey and a cinnamon stick. And then pour hot water into that. And then, however much whiskey you want to put in there and stir that up really nicely and serve. That is a really, really nice, lemon, ginger, honey, pretty classic combo. That alone is a really great winter warmer tea. Just grated ginger with the juice squeezed in. If you slice the ginger and pour hot water on it, you're not gonna really get a very strong ginger flavor. I like to grate it in the small little grater and then squeeze the juice in. That's a really nice way to do it. And then you've got your hot buttered rum, which is more of this blend of cinnamon and cardamom and clove and nutmeg, allspice, things like that mixed together. And that's generally mixed with butter and a little bit of brown sugar until you get a nice paste. And then, say a tablespoon of that in a mug, hot water, and then however much rum you want to add to that. And that, again, very nice, spiced, oily with all the butter. So you're getting the oils and the spices. And of course, the rum can be absolutely lovely if that's your thing. Of course, there's also mulled wine, where you mull wine with many of these same spices, right? There's a reason, and I mention these because these are herbs that have been used in this context for a really long time, and incorporated not just as teas, but also in a pleasant alcoholic beverage to drink on a cold, snowy winter night, if that's your thing. I also love holy basil here. On a side note, to good tea, warming tea herbs. I really like Tulsi because it tastes good to most people. It's got a very nice, richly aromatic flavor. It's nicely carminative for the GI. It's got some good upper respiratory tract, antimicrobial, antibacterial. It can help clear mucus out of the upper respiratory tract pretty well. And also, Tulsi has this really nice, I would say, kind of relatively mild adaptogenic and nervine effect and nootropic effect that's very, very nice in the winter, especially for people that maybe have to do a lot of intellectual work, thinking, writing, researching, whatever. If you need to use your brain a lot in the wintertime for work, I like incorporating Tulsi into a tea because it's just very nicely for warming you up physically, but also warming you up mentally. I also really like it for people that get a little bit melancholic. I really like a combination of, if people get, say, a little bit of seasonal affective disorder, you have things like Tulsi, St. John's wort, and milky oat seed in a tincture form can be very, very nice base formula for people that maybe get a little melancholic, a little down and out. Of course, taking that alongside ample amounts of vitamin D can be an important part of that protocol as well. So these are some of the herbs that I really like as teas. We also have this other category of some of the adaptogens that are warming, and also immune tonics or deeper immune rejuvenative herbs. Obviously, this is the season when people are much more prone to getting sick. So taking care of your immune system is really important throughout the winter months. For this, my favorites would be things like ashwagandha, reishi, holy basil, once again, cordyceps mushroom, and Codonopsis, which is it's also called the poor man's ginseng. It's Codonopsis pilosula. Really, really nice tasting herb, mildly sweet and a little bit bitter, but mostly sweet, nourishing, building, strengthening, adaptogenic, mildly adaptogenic, but great immune tonification there. Mentioning ashwagandha, one of my favorite ways to do ashwagandha is a traditional way it's prepared in Ayurveda, where you take your pot and you melt, say, a tablespoon in a pot, gently warmed. Once it starts to crackle a little bit, you sprinkle your ashwagandha powder in that, stir it up really well, and let that gently heat up for a little bit. And then you pour milk over that and stir that up very well, and drink your ashwagandha that way. It's a really, really great way to take ashwagandha. It's said to be very pacifying to vata and pitta because of the ghee. It is a mildly warming herb, but there's something about that combination with the milk and the ghee that adjusts as a corrigent the property a little bit. But very, very good for the nervous system, for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Very, very good warming, gently warming remedy there. I really like ashwagandha, kind of do like almost like an ashwagandha latte, I guess. Of course, for the true latte coffee drinkers, it's like, that's not a latte. But if you're maybe trying to ease up on coffee a little bit, you can try it out. And I like putting other spices in there too. Just to improve the flavor, right? A little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of cardamom can be very nice in there. So one of my favorite teas here would be what I think of as like a creamy warming tea. This is, again, kind of nice for the people that enjoy creamy coffee and things like that. So this would be 40% turmeric, 40% ashwagandha, 5% each cardamom, cinnamon, licorice, 3% ginger, 2% black pepper. This is just a very nice warming tea blend. It's going to move blood. It's going to stimulate digestion. It's going to warm the nervous system. It's going to modulate inflammation. It's going to be mildly adaptogenic. It's going to be immune strengthening, immune amphoteric with the turmeric and the ashwagandha and the licorice. This is just a really, really nice formula. Of course, you can adjust the amounts of those herbs to taste. This is just how I like it. You can certainly take out the ashwagandha and licorice and make it a little more of a classic golden milk, which is another nice warming tea that I really like. And you can make this with water and a splash of cream, or you can make it all with milk and a little bit of honey to sweeten it up a little bit. Very nice formula there. And then if you wanted more of a non-creamy tea, you could do 2 parts fennel and a 1/2 part ginger and a 1/4 part licorice. This is a very nice, simple, spiced tea, warming, aromatic, digestive, circulatory stimulant, just fantastic. Of course, this is how the ratios I like. Adjust it to taste is the way that I say to do it. If you're pre-blending it, keep in mind that dried ginger root is significantly warmer than fresh ginger root, so keep that in mind. And just as a note here, if you do have high blood pressure or are on high blood pressure medications, eliminate the licorice from those formulas to be on the safe side. So these are just some of the ways that I like to think about the warming materia medica and some herbs that you can hopefully incorporate into your seasonal transitional routines to help maintain the health of your constitution and your body throughout the winter months. And hopefully you got some inspiration from some of these herbs. Get out there, make yourself a warming tea, drink it every day. Notice the effect that it has. Maybe make note of whether you get sick as often as you usually do or not. These are some really great ways to just keep you healthy and vital throughout the changing seasons. So thanks so much for checking out this episode of The Plant Path. I truly appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe. Head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com where we got lots of more free training and videos and downloads and all kinds of great stuff going on over there. But just giving us a thumbs up and a like and a subscribe really does help support the channel and our ability to continue to publish content for free to the herbal community. So thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And until the next one, take care and be well.